Thank you very much, President von der Leyen. And now we go to the first round of the political group speakers, starting with the EPP group. Andrzej Halicki, 1.5 minutes. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, on the 22nd of November 2020, 3 years ago, we adopted a resolution in which we called Russia a terrorism organizing state, a state that organizes terrorism against us, against Europe. Not everybody shared this view. I was a co-author of this resolution. However, on the 10th of September, Poland and then Denmark, then Munich saw fighter jets and drones. And every day we have more and more proof of Russia attacking systematically, attacking Europe in a systematic manner. I am very happy with the proposals of the Commission President and Mr. Kubilius. I think the only thing Russia understands is power, so the unity of our countries is vital. These fighter jets or drones were shot down. We are acting together, but we must be much more efficient. So I call upon more action on the internet, because Russia is using hybrid warfare, and there are Russia's agents also in this room. They say this is not our war. They want us to be weak. Our defense industry needs support, and not only budgetary support. So I do call upon the European Commission. Let us take out the production of chemical products, metals, out of the ETS, because we do need new legislation in this matter. Thank you very much.
Chair of the S&D Group, Irache Garcia Perez.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, President. Let me start by expressing our full solidarity with Ukraine, which for more than 3 years has resisted the Russian aggression, and solidarity with all countries whose airspace has been violated, their infrastructure has been violated, and the lives of citizens have been put at risk. Every Russian drone that flies above us is a warning. It shows that Putin will not be stopped. For some time now, we've been saying that it doesn't make sense to appease. It never has worked. It never will work. Putin never wanted peace, not in Georgia, the Crimea, or in Donbass, and nor across Ukraine. Putin will only negotiate when he feels that he is losing, and that is why we have to help Ukraine to win this war. Madam von der Leyen, it is time to seize the 200 billion euros of frozen Russian assets, and the Council must take responsibility and allow Ukraine to use Western weapons against military sites from which Russia launches attacks. There is no more time to lose. This is a turning point. Only the European Union can ensure the survival of Ukraine, and Ukraine's survival also affects our own security. Our security depends upon it. But it's not enough to just provide support. We must strengthen the European Union. We need to have a European defence industry which is capable of action, a European pillar within NATO, a joint air and anti-drone defence system, and we have to have more investment in innovation, cybersecurity and joint production. Putin is challenging our freedom, but our response needs to be more Europe, a strong Europe, a united Europe, capable of protecting its skies, its land and its future. We don't fear the noise of drones. We will respond with the unity of our Union. Thank you.
Madame la Présidente, Monsieur le Commissaire,
President,
Commissioners, we are very much attached to state sovereignty, territorial integrity and the inviolable nature of our borders, and that's why we clearly and unambiguously denounce the violations of airspace carried out by Russia. But this is a hard line that needs to be accompanied by lucidity and proportionality. Excessive responses, which call any intrusion an act of war and call for any flying object to be shot down, really hide what is generally at stake and are counterproductive. They tend to feed Russian propaganda, which tend to present countries that are victims as those responsible for escalation. And this panicked response is something which creates a climate of fear, which doesn't facilitate but rather counteracts ambitious military policy. There are violations on our eastern flank, but our pilots and our armed forces are in control, so let's not panic or get involved in self-defeating paranoia. We're not at war with Russia, and that is fortunate, but we are not in peace either. These categories haven't disappeared, but they are two extreme ends of a spectrum in which there are many grey areas, each party trying to impose their will on the other. And that's where we are, in a grey zone of peace war with Russia. Any call to commit irreversible acts should be avoided, but at the same time we shouldn't be paralysed by the threats we are facing. Because let's not kid ourselves. Military invasion is not the only option that a state has to impose its will on another. When we talk about the new generation of war, we often forget that the best strategists are not just sitting in some Western think tanks, but also they exist in Russia, where long ago they thought about a doctrine that would avoid the use of armed engagement to achieve objectives, strategic objectives. So what can we do? Deter. Deter from a potentially active role of our armed forces. Deter by turning the page on the last 30 years, where we proclaimed the end of history and also proclaimed the end of territory. But territory is back. And at the same time, there is a need to protect it, to be robust and resilient, not just protect against jihadist groups, but also against opponent or hostile states. Deterring avoids harm, and that's what we should be capable of doing in Europe with regard to Russia. So no gung-ho militarism or bleeding heart Municism, to translate the words of de Gaulle when he was talking about those who wanted to appease Khrushchev. So deterrence, because war is not desirable and peace is not yet possible. Thank you.
See, now for the ECR group, Adam Bielan. 2 minutes.
Szanowna Pani Przewodnicząca.
President, Russia is starting more and more refined attempt to put pressure on the West. And the last weeks have shown us that the aggressive policy of Kremlin has no borders. And the violation of Polish and other countries' airspace, sabotage of critical infrastructure, including energy system and telecommunication systems, and disinformation activities. They all prove that Russia does not abide by international law at all. This is a well-planned strategy to threaten our societies. This is an attack against the integrity and safety of the whole free world. This is an attack which calls for a decisive response. Any attempt to violate our security must be met with immediate coordinated response from the EU and NATO. We cannot agree to test our borders and our patience and our solidarity. If we do not take care of those small issues, it can lead to huge tragedies, like in history before. Poland and other eastern member states of the EU who have suffered Russian imperialism for decades, we understand it very well. Unfortunately, not all the countries led a policy that was really Europe-centered. The so-called reset of relationship with Russia, which truly meant that we were sponsoring anti-European enterprises such as Nord Stream, and these were milestones before the war. And now we see drones over Berlin, Brussels or Copenhagen, let us think about the billions of euros that Gerhard Schroeder and Angela Merkel put into Russian coffers. Yes, Angela Merkel, who now is trying to get rid of any responsibility, and she's suggesting that it is the fault of other countries. The German government is also calling to talk about those who were responsible for Nord Stream. So I want to tell to Chancellor Merz that Ukraine is now fighting a war with Russia because it was aggressed. And the Ukrainians have every right to attack also Russian refineries. We have to support them in this. Thank you.
Now for the Renew Europe group, it's Chair Valérie Hayer. 3 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President, Minister, colleagues. It's a moment of truth for the European Union. We're no longer at peace, but we're not at war either. We are in this grey zone called a hybrid war. Russia is sending cyber attacks, sabotage and incursions. They're sending drones and fighters into our airspace. These are threats we're well aware of. It's not new, but our reactions still aren't up to the challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to assume a form of confrontation with Russia. We have to ratchet up our response, I would say in our riposte, in fact. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if we want peace, Putin understands one thing, power. If we want to be free, then we have to be in a position where we can be powerful. Being powerful means we need to increase budgets, and member states have agreed to do that in record levels by 2030. Minister, when will we leave our dependency behind? We have to be autonomous in production so that we have a basis for strategic autonomy in the EU. We need to increase investments in infrastructure for military hardware as well. But being powerful means we have to have a drone screen that will help us. We have to have a surveillance over the eastern flank. We need to be powerful in bringing down any drone that constitutes immediate danger to us. It's about sanctioning Viktor Orban, who sends Hungarian drones over Ukrainian airspace. It's scandalous. We need to use the full force of frozen assets from Russia to fund this. We need to show solidarity with Romania, with Poland, with Estonia. Even if you're not part of the European Union, you are not alone, because your security is the security of all Europeans. And I would also say to those who claim that we're going over the top, that we're going to push things into war. Well, threats are something that affects all member states, from Madrid to Malaga to all over the territory of the EU. What we need is Russia to stop the provocations in its hybrid war against us, because we are stronger than them. We are stronger.
Now for the Greens group, it's co-chair Terry Reintke. 2 minutes.
Thank you, President, dear Commission President, dear Minister, dear colleagues. The European Union is built on solidarity. So first and foremost, I want to say that we stand with all the people who are at the moment feeling the Russian threat the most, and these are the people living in the frontline states, in the Baltics, in Poland and Finland. It has to be clear, when one of us gets attacked, we all get attacked, and we will be at your side in these difficult times. And for that, we need European strength right now, because Putin will not succeed in weakening Europe by spreading fear. That's exactly the aim of all the things that are happening right now. This will only forge a stronger solidarity between European citizens. We will resist this threat together. And this means that rightfully at the eastern flank we need a drone defence network. And across all of the European Union we need better protection against drones, whether it's at our airports, power plants or other critical infrastructure. And this means we finally have to phase out of dirty Russian energy imports. In August 2025 alone, EU EU member states still spend over 1 billion euros on Russian fossil fuels. Colleagues, this has to stop. They are using this money to wage war against Ukraine and threaten the rest of the European Union. And this means not European citizens should pay for Putin's war, but Putin himself. It is high time that we make full use of the frozen Russian assets. Make Putin pay for the damage he has done in Ukraine and all of Europe. And finally, colleagues, Ukraine belongs in the European Union. In the past years, it has become more than crystal clear that there is actually no place in Europe where people long for our vision of freedom and democracy more than in Ukraine. So let's make it happen as soon as possible. I want Ukrainian colleagues to sit here in this chamber and to discuss and fight with us for a stronger Europe together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now, on behalf of the Left Group, Danilo Della Valle. 1.5 minutes.
Grazie, Presidente. Thank you, President. A few days ago, we discovered that former Chancellor Merkel was a supporter of Putin because she said there should have been dialogue with Putin before the attack that Russia carried out in Ukraine. But we can see that there's dangerous leadership here at play, and people are trying to cover their own shortcomings. And thanks to your intervention, President, we're seeing that there's a lot of fake news that we need to counter coming from Russia, trying to sow panic amongst the population. We know that they're trying to undermine consensus, and there are policies that there isn't consensus over, like Rearm EU, and looking at the idea of drones flying over half of Europe, and then Nord Stream as well, and the problems of Ukraine. The 13th of October attacks are also things we need to look at. As we say in Italy, sometimes when you talk badly of somebody, it's for a good reason. We know that we need to avoid dragging everybody into war, sacrificing millions of young people for the sake of the bankers and lobbyists. European citizens don't believe anymore in the von der Leyen approach, and not because of what Putin is saying, it's because they're tired of lies, of this perpetual attempt of war and these exchange of missiles. We need to avoid this supremacist vocabulary. We are seeing a multipolar war. We need to avoid war. Thank you, Mr. Della Valle.
1 minute.
Ďakujem pekne. Kolegovia, zase tu máme ďalšiu diskusiu o vojne, o strachu.
Thank you, colleagues. Once again, we are having a discussion about war, about fear. But do you know, Ms. von der Leyen, how difficult everyday life is for our citizens, how difficult it is to buy a flat or a house, to get a mortgage, which they have to pay off throughout their whole lives? The EU doesn't seem to be interested in these problems, or only interested when it affects marginalized groups. So here we are, talking about hundreds of millions of euros to be spent on armaments, military production, etc. And we're talking about hundreds of billions being poured into this. Maybe you don't know this, but what the people want is peace, economic stability, and not more weapons.
1.5 minutes.